Bona tarda a tothom. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Welcome, Elsie Owusu, to Foros 2020 lecture series Co-Benefits, and thank you very much for your participating with your lecture Architecture, Art and Inclusion, Lockdown Dreams. We are very glad to hear you. Saludamos también a Carmen Mendoza, subdirectora de Relaciones Internacionales de la School of Architecture, y, como no, a Freddy Massad, codirector del ciclo Foros 2020. Y bienvenidos una vez más a todos los que estáis conectados. Llegamos hoy a la última de las conferencias del ciclo en streaming Foros 2020, Co-Benefits, Beneficios Colaterales, organizado por UIC Barcelona School of Architecture, con la intervención de la arquitecta británica originaria de Ghana, Elsie Owusu. Arquitectura, arte, inclusión, sueños del confinamiento. Seguramente son muchas las preguntas que nos hacemos acerca de cómo va a ser el paisaje social, económico, político y cultural inmediato tras la brusca irrupción en nuestras vidas del COVID-19. Y seguramente, lo leemos y lo escuchamos a diario, cualquier argumento acerca del futuro próximo deba ser puesto en cuarentena, debido a la incerteza, a la indeterminación y a las dudas que ese futuro que imaginamos desde una necesaria y estricta razón pueda presentar. Pero no es gratuito en este contexto apelar por unos instantes a André Breton y recordar que el sueño también forma parte de nuestra realidad. Y quizás sea Elsie Owusu, desde su experiencia profesional como arquitecta, como urbanista y como activista por los derechos humanos, quien nos pueda mostrar de manera más sencilla cómo soñar e imaginar un mundo mejor. Una expresión que, aunque pueda sonar a oídos de los escépticos como naif o infantil, tenemos la obligación de construirla día a día desde el rigor y desde la necesaria convicción de que efectivamente, si algún objetivo fundamental tiene la arquitectura, es precisamente construir un mundo mejor. Paso a continuación la palabra a Carmen Mendoza, subdirectora de Relaciones Internacionales de UIC Barcelona School of Architecture. El micro, the microphone, Carmen.
Sorry about that.
No.
I thought I had clicked it. Bueno, buenas tardes. Good afternoon. I would like to start by giving a warm welcome to architect Elsie Owusu on behalf of the board of the School of Architecture of UIC Barcelona, of which I am part of. We are very honored with your participation in our Foros lecture series, as we believe your architecture represents many of the core values that our School of Architecture wants to portray and give to our students. Values such as developing quality architecture, both at an architectural and at an urban scale, with a high commitment towards social values, and one that contributes to countries with emerging economies. Therefore, an international perspective with a firm that is both local and global due to collaborations from people and projects around the world. We are sure your lecture, Elsie, will enhance our students' understanding of an architecture practice that links culture and the arts to social responsibility. Thank you and welcome again. I would like now to give the word to Freddy Massad, co-organizer of Foros. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Carmen. Thank you very much, Elsie, for being with us, for accepting the invitation. Y voy a empezar comentando un poco quién es Elsie Owusu. Es arquitecta y diseñadora urbana. Durante 10 años fue socia del despacho Feilden Mawson, donde codirigió la renovación de la Corte Suprema del Reino Unido y rediseñó la entrada de la estación del metro de Green Park. En 2015 fundó su propio despacho de arquitectura. Sus proyectos actuales incluyen un estudio de residencia para el artista Yinka Yoshibare en Lagos, una casa bajo consumo energético en Sussex y un plan de desarrollo ecológico en Takoradi, Ghana. La arquitecta ejerce además como directora de Just Ghana, una organización ética que promueve la inversión interna y un buen gobierno en Ghana, con un enfoque especial en la educación para niños y jóvenes en el ámbito de las industrias creativas. En 2003 fue condecorada con el Orden del Imperio Británico que concede la reina Isabel II por sus servicios en el ámbito de la arquitectura como presidenta fundadora de la Society of Black Architects. Fue elegida African Business Woman of the Year en 2014 y fue finalista para la presidencia del Royal Institute of British Architects in 2018, que perdió ante el arquitecto irlandés Alan Jones. Muchas gracias, Elsie. Primero tendremos, como siempre, su conferencia y después se abrirá un turno de preguntas y respuestas que dirigirá y que será encargado de transmitir sus preguntas Marcos de Espíritu Santo, que lo verán aparecer luego. Thank you very much, Elsie, and go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you so much, everyone. And it's a real pleasure to be here and to be able to join you from a very, very quiet London. My talk is going to focus on the challenges and opportunities after COVID, and the special focus of this particular talk is the work that we're doing in the UK and in Nigeria for the great artist Yinka Shonibare. So my view is that architects are a huge untapped resource of energy, creativity and talent, with the potential for reaching excluded groups in the UK and across the world. As the international lockdown eases, architects must make a new business as usual, a different normal. We can make this period of enforced isolation an opportunity for contemplation, to see visions and dream dreams of a new society based on equality, diversity, and justice. Small and medium-sized and micro practices, long excluded from mainstream architecture, can leapfrog from the 19th century into the 21st and 22nd centuries. UK's creative sectors have a global reputation for world-class architecture, engineering, sustainable design and construction. Many of these are small firms, which are the lifeblood of the economy, with an unparalleled ability to create wealth, providing jobs, education, training for many young people. There's a real danger that without proper safeguards, these companies, which in normal times are often excluded by the procurement processes, will struggle to get onto tender lists and win projects. With COVID-19 protocols, such as working from home, WFH, and social distancing, SME, small medium enterprises, and BAME, Black and minority ethnic-led businesses, are uniquely placed to help society to implement the new normal. Having deployed WFH practices for many years, we are in a position to help to design and construct new environments which will make our communities resilient and safe against future pandemics, protecting the most vulnerable members of our society. When I was about 9 years old, I dreamed that architecture would be a way to help other people, to share our family's privileges, and to make a better world for everyone. Unfortunately, we only begin to see that most clearly when things begin to go wrong. Joni Mitchell said, or sang, "You don't know what you've got till it's gone." And the pandemic has hit British architecture very hard. But here's why I believe it'll come back stronger. Architecture was challenging before the lockdown. Most architects in this country are either self-employed or work for small firms. Many don't have pensions, and most work from project to project. In other words, from hand to mouth. While it can be a fantastically rewarding career, for many, it is not a secure one. But the lockdown has made it harder for small and medium-sized practices. According to the Architects Journal, a survey of the 24th of March 2020, 37% of architects will not get full sick pay for the duration of the corona-related illness, receiving only £94 per week in statutory sick pay for having been laid off. As construction closed down, the pipeline of new projects has run dry. University courses have closed. Many architects who are directors of small companies can't furlough themselves. Many of the architecture practices which were eligible for government support simply won't have enough cash flow to bridge the gap until the money comes through. 27% of respondents expect to be away from the office indefinitely. That's to say, they won't have a job. Despite the seemingly grim news, my overwhelming impression is not one of panic. It is of stoicism, creativity, and resourcefulness. One office stated, "We migrated to Google Suite about 6 months ago. It was an easy step to set up remote working. Sole practitioners and micro practices, many who are mothers, often work from home in any case. The serious challenge is the lack of access to finance. Recent figures from RIBA, Royal Institute of British Architects, revealed that 81% of us are still working from home. That means that someone, somewhere, right now, is hard at work developing smart new infrastructure to help dispersed design teams of architects and engineers and artists to collaborate more smoothly than ever before. In my own practice, we're figuring out new ways of collaborating with our design teams using drones to lower the cost of site inspections. We're figuring out how to manage our site in Lagos while the city is in lockdown. You can't get your boots dirty and wave your arms around on a building site. Meetings with my clients in St. Margaret's Bay, just opposite the channel, or the teams in China and Ghana are much more businesslike because you're stuck in London or in Birmingham. The lockdown is forcing us to think with the ingenuity of smart young startups and figure out how to lower our overheads and win new business from our homes and front rooms. The period might even make our profession more democratic and meritocratic because many young and BAME architects will find it harder than ever to get jobs, and so many will start their own practices. In this way, they will rise faster to the top than they have before and be in more control. Because so many women in big firms are working effectively from home, when they return to their offices, they may find it easier to win the right to flexible working whilst earning their richly deserved promotions. The lesson I take from all this is that our profession needs to have an internal conversation about how we can support each other so that innovations and workarounds that we're developing can benefit all of us. Our profession should use this difficult, potentially fertile period as an opportunity for a great reappraisal, not just of how we could work, but also of what we could contribute to the post-COVID universe. I know that when most people consider the nation's great social and economic challenges, their minds don't normally turn to architects, but they should. The UK needs to build over 300,000 homes to deal with the undersupply of housing, which has left part of the country unlivable for people like our treasured NHS nurses who survive on very low incomes. It is architects, planners, and engineers who will help to ensure that enough of these new homes and communities are built to high standards while remaining affordable. We must make sure that these homes are secure and that there are enough well-paid jobs in architecture and that they are genuinely open to people of all family backgrounds. Local authorities, with their great power of procurement, could use this enforced creativity as an opportunity to develop infrastructure, to engage the talents and skills of the thousands of small and micro practices to deliver their homes, which our country so urgently needs, from their own homes. Architecture offers many creative jobs and could offer more. So architects who proactively encourage young people from diverse backgrounds into the profession are doing the country a great service. And Britain must become carbon neutral by 2050 by law. If British architects are incentivized to be resourceful and innovative in support of that goal, we will not only hit our targets sooner, but we will also build up the know-how which will help architecture grow as a strong exporter to the rest of the world. If we get this right, the innovations, the new IT systems and the workarounds that we're developing will get us through the lockdown, and they might even be more than just a sticking plaster for business as usual. This could start a sector-wide conversation across the creative industries about how to integrate our professions and contribute new models, new thoughts for a post-pandemic and resilient society. A conversation about emerging with more congenial, humane and flexible working conditions to make architecture easier for parents and for others with caring responsibilities must take place. About how we can be inspired by that great leveler, Zoom, with apologies to StreamYard, of course, to emerge as a more meritocratic, egalitarian profession, less interested in what accent you speak with, what school you went to, and whether you're working from a plush office in London or a kitchen table at home, and more interested in the quality of your work. And about how British architecture can use this painful, challenging period to do more than just survive, but to emerge even more resilient and diverse than ever. Last year, and that seems a century ago, UK had a housing crisis. It still has a housing crisis. But now we have not only a climate emergency, we also have a pandemic crisis under COVID-19 outbreak. As architects, we're involved in leading the design for the next wave of 21st and 22nd century housing. How much we're doing as a to make sure, how much are we doing as a profession to make sure that architects in meetings are responsible to their communities? A young female architect said to me recently, if you don't have women on design teams, things just don't get thought about. For example, when I think about urban design, I think a lot about how it affects people's lives. Sometimes when we're planning spaces, I just want to say, you can't do that. I would never walk down there. I would never cycle down there. As a woman, I have very different experiences of living in the city. My profession needs, our profession needs the right mix of people in the leadership to make those points when it matters. And if we don't, then of course architecture in the end won't be about the people's lives. It will be abstract, but architecture isn't abstract, and it is about enabling people to live a good life. With the lessons from COVID, architecture must be more about making our homes safe and enjoyable spaces. With social distancing, we must make our families more comfortable, less isolated. Our workplaces must become more effective. Our courts to design and encourage trust that justice will be delivered there, that our transport systems will be safe and welcoming and efficient to use, so everyone can benefit from a variety of life in our cities. And so that brings me to the end of my talk, really. And I would just like to say in closing that cities are used by everyone, and so everyone should be involved in designing them. That's what I've been campaigning for many, many years, and we still have a lot of work to do. So thank you very much for listening.
Good evening, Elsie. Thank you very much for such an interesting lecture. I would like to encourage our students and the other members of the audience to start to ask some questions, but I would like to start asking you a question. You said that architecture was challenging before this pandemic reality. Don't you think you gave us some insights already in your lecture, but don't you think it's time for our profession to forget about this star system architecture and to start to putting people in the center of the practice?
Yes, of course, I do. Yeah, and I don't think that most of the profession is involved in the star system. I think the star system is an obsession of a very small group of people. Most architects, certainly in this country, are sole practitioners. They run their businesses usually from their homes, and they struggle to make a living. Most people are not involved in the star system, and I think actually the star system is an impediment to architects being creative because it takes attention away from the stuff of real architecture.
So we should start for changing the way we are teaching our students, you mean, I guess?
Well, I mean, I think my experience as a student was that you had to pay homage to the stars. And if you didn't pay homage to the stars, then you were likely not to get very far. So I think, as with the Me Too movement and all sorts of other forms of social democratization, which are happening at the moment, I think it's time for architecture to also be democratized. But I think that is up to the students, really, the young people, to make a stand and make a difference.
We can go through now some questions from the students. We have this question from Alejandra. Do you believe the pandemic will give place to new ways of housing, planning, and design?
Yes, definitely. I think it has to, because the alternative is that more and more and more people are going to die. And you can see from the numbers, you can see from the statistics that the habit that hospitals had of moving people out of hospital and not into their own home, but into care homes, has meant that the numbers of people dying in care homes has risen exponentially. I think I had a chart on one of my slides. So I think that designing in a humane way, so that people can be born in one place, live there their whole lives if they want to, and if they want to die at home with their families, they shouldn't be warehoused in an institution, which eventually has, well, this crisis has proved aren't the safest place for elderly or vulnerable people to be. So you know, so the idea of people being in their own home has proved that that is a more resilient model than putting people into institutions. So, but that's just one example. I mean, you can take the example of transport. You can take the example of transport systems which force hundreds of thousands of people to be in machines at a certain time of the day in order to get to work, and then come back in the opposite direction under the same uncomfortable position situations. And those conditions have proved to be quite dangerous for human beings in an epidemic, because that's where it spreads. So you know, the protocols of social distancing, although they are tough, if we designed for people to be able to work in a congenial way, to work from home, to exercise, to travel in a less stressful way, I think that the design of cities will change. I think the design of homes will change, and I think urban design itself will change as well. So it's very early days, but it does seem that way.
Hopefully. We have this other question from Lucila. Thank you, Elsie. It's an honor to be listening to you. I'm a public practice associate working for Croydon Council in placemaking team. What are your thoughts on community-led housing?
Well, I'm all for it. I mean, I don't know what happened to community-led housing. There was, when I started in practice as a young architect, I worked for a housing association, and that's all I'd ever wanted to do. So in my second year, I started working for a housing association, and I continued to work for a housing association for as long as I could. And something happened to community-led housing between the 70s and the 80s. And I think what happened was Margaret Thatcher. So I think that so there was a big housing movement where small groups of architects were working on small clusters of buildings, which actually added up to a huge number that could be delivered. But then somebody decided that the houses should be built in hundreds of thousands. And at the moment, what we have, and I think Croydon is a great exception and a great example, is that we have 3,000 so-called units, not homes, being designed and built by single practices. So you have 50% of architects who are sole practitioners who could be providing excellent housing within their own communities, where they know people, where they live together, where, you know, if your house goes wrong, you know who to complain to, which might not be such a good thing. But instead of which, you have these practices which are delivering 5,000 units, 10,000 units, and you can't possibly design for the individual if you're producing units which could be, you know, they could be sardine tins, or they could be chairs, or, you know, and I think we're seeing the outcomes of that factory approach to human beings, which is that not only does it make people unhappy, but it makes people unwell. And when, you know, when a bat sneezes in Wuhan, the whole of the world closes down. You know, so I think, you know, we'd better think about what we're doing, and we'd better think about making a built environment that keeps people well. Yes, so I think community, and I think designing for communities in small batches of, you know, 10, 15, 5, 20 homes is, to me, is the only way to do it, because the other way has proved to be a stunning failure.
Exactly. We have this other question from Charlie. How would you encourage entrepreneurs to start developing their own design studios following the severe financial situation?
Well, we're campaigning for this because it's certainly what the UK government has done for small businesses has been really helpful, really helpful. And as a small business myself, I mean, I really appreciate what Rishi Sunak has done, but I think that from now on it should be, let's break it down, guys. You know, if you can't keep supporting people, you can't keep paying money and free money into people's accounts. There's work out there. There's housing and infrastructure being procured. Let's break it down and make sure that people share the work. You know, And I think that's what we should campaign for. Is we should be working within our own communities. We can be delivering, anywhere in the world, but the infrastructure that has been developed so fast to be able to furlough people, to get money to people, to get food to people, we can see, to get people off the streets. Homeless people have just been 4,000 homeless people were taken off the streets overnight. So we can see what can happen if there's a political will, and how creative politicians can be if there's a political will. So we should be saying, let's use that political will to change society for the benefit of everybody. Because, if a prime minister can end up in intensive care for 3 days, this is something that we all need to take seriously, politicians.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay. Cam asks, do you think that the way of designing public spaces are going to change in a way of separate people from one another even more?
Well, yeah, I don't know how long social distancing is going to last, but, in the park near where I live, some bureaucrat has gone along the pavement with yellow paint and has marked out 2-meter spaces. So even seeing that gives you, as a designer, you really think about yellow stripes on the pavement. That already in the last 3 weeks has made a difference, and somebody's designed it. Somebody's decided they're going to do that, and they've decided. So, and I think social distancing as well. This isn't going to be the last pandemic. I doubt very much if it's, there might be a repeat. So I think that people are thinking and talking very much about how urban design, how housing design, how the design of cities and transport has to change. And to me, this is a sort of design-led crisis, because it's the doctors that are going to get us out of the emergency, but it's the engineers and the artists and the architects who are going to secure a resilient future. So I think this is a great opportunity and a great challenge for us as a community to come up with, not even to come up with ideas, but to provide leadership, and optimism and thought, whilst we're all sitting at home, not being able to go for walks.
Do you think there will be more political support in this sense?
I think we have to go get it. I think we have to make that political support. I think we have to go out there and say, hey guys, we've got the solutions. Don't sit at home in your isolated lockdown waiting for the politicians to knock on your door, because that's not going to happen. I think what we need to do through forums like this, and the inventing ways of talking to each other, is to say, you in Spain, me in London, Yinka Shonibari in Nigeria, somebody else in China, we can talk to each other. We can invent stuff, we can make solutions, and people are looking for solutions, because nobody knows how this thing works. So it's up to us now to use our ingenuity and creativity, and create leadership for the next generation.
Perfect. We have a question from our assistant director, from Carmen Mendoza. She asks, being part of the Ghanaian diaspora and as a woman architect, has it been difficult to work and build in Ghana, in your country?
Yes. It is difficult because resources are so scarce. There is a huge wealth of talent, unbelievably talented and bright, sparky people. But when you see the lack of resource, even from the point of view of books and just materials, You know, it's very, very difficult. So like lots of emerging economies, there is a huge amount of wealth at the top and very, very scarce resource at the bottom. So unless you want to go around building mansions for very wealthy people, and I've got limited interest in that, you know, it's you can make plans and projects and work with lots and lots of talented people, but to find the resource to actually implement the stuff, the ideas, is really hard, really, really hard. So I think what we're doing now is really focusing on young people, particularly children, from 3 to 5, and trying to build a new generation of urban designers and architects. So I'm just going to have to recharge my phone because.
Okay, don't worry. Take your time. We can wait.
Yeah.
So
sorry.
I can bring you the next question.
Okay.
Isabel Gomez, she asks, how do you think is the best way to create an architecture that can democratize within a political space of oppression and government control?
I don't think there is a template. I think one of the problems is trying to find a one-size-fits-all solution. I think that democratization by definition has to be people talking to each other, people knowing each other, and being part of their communities. You know, you have, I don't know what you call them in Spain, but general practitioners. You know, you have doctors who have their neighborhood surgeries. You know, they know people, they know whose kid's sick, they know the grandparents, they know who's having children. I mean, they're part of the community. And I think that's what architects should be. And I think that's how architects should be resourced, so that architects themselves become a resource for the community. And I think that way you begin to democratize the profession. And it's a bit like in Ghana, where you have, or emerging economies, where you have a small group of very, very, very prosperous practitioners at the top. And then you have a huge sort of upswelling of not exactly poor, but, you know, really people who are struggling from project to project and day to day, you know. And I think, to me, delivery is so much more let's say efficient if you democratize architecture, so that you have some people maybe doing a small project because they want to do a small project, but, you know, with this the use of technology, building information management systems, BIM systems, you know, we work with people in Nigeria, in China, in UK, and you can all be working on the same project. So actually, you could have 50 people being paid, not huge amounts of money, but comfortable amounts of money to work on very, very big projects. And I think we should experiment with that. But you have to persuade the politicians that, and the vested interests, that actually everyone would be so much better off if we shared rather than kept everything to ourselves, you know.
Okay, we have this other question from Juan. He asks, if you had been elected as president of the RIBA, what would you have changed in order to boost inclusion?
Well, I think that education is, I think that the gateways in architectural education, which, by the way, is way too expensive and probably too long, I think the gateways need to be looked at, because there is something happening in UK architecture. I don't know about the stats in Spain, but certainly there is something happening to students from underrepresented groups, by which I mean minority ethnic and female students, where they start off as students bright-eyed, enthusiastic, professional, and as they go through the course, they get closed down. And you can see that in the numbers. So I think that those gateways need to be looked at. And I think that the curriculum, which is, I think the curriculum needs to be democratized so that it's about architecture as people's lived experience. And that's not hard to do. But I think that the exclusive nature of the profession requires that those gateways are heavily policed. So I think those gateways need to be opened out. I think that the payment systems are so antiquated. So if you get a government contract, you might take 6 months before you get paid. Well, if you're a small business, that's no good. You know, it needs to be like Amazon. You know, we've got the payment systems. You know, I do my job. I send the drawings through. I go click, and the money's in my account. You know, I don't phone up your finance director and say, "Oh, please, Mr. Finance Director, could you think you could possibly pay me?" And they go, "No, I'll pay you next Friday." You know, you don't do that. You know, if I buy a book from Amazon, I don't get it, read it, decide if I like it, and then pay.
Yeah.
You know, I say, I want that service. Click, money comes. So I think it needs to be, that sort of transaction needs to be applied to architecture. And believe me, that's what the lawyers do. The lawyers have a pay platform like you would not believe.
They're clever than us. Right.
So I think it's partly it's to do with money, but it's actually architects respecting ourselves as a profession and valuing ourselves as a profession and seeing ourselves as a resource. And if you don't value yourself, you're going to have a very hard time getting other people to value you and your time. So I think it starts with us as a profession, with our self-respect. So anyway, that's a very long-winded way of saying that.
We have this other question from Lucas. She says, people are constantly talking about going back to our pre-COVID lives. Do you think governments will try to implement what you have exposed to us instead of trying to recover the past?
I don't think there is a post. I don't think there's any return. I don't think there's any return. I mean, I think that epidemiologists have been saying for a long time, this is going to happen. And politicians have been going, yeah, no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And then, you know, I mean, it only takes one very important politician to find themselves at death's door. You know, Prime Minister Johnson was saying that when he was in intensive care, they had prepared a statement for what they were going to say when he died. And you know, and he's come out of hospital a different man from the one who went in, and 3 weeks before that he was saying, "Oh well, I shake everybody's hand, you know, I'm
He was denying the pandemic, right?
Exactly. So I think that there is no going back to the past, but it's really what sort of future we go into and what sort of risks people are prepared to take with our lives, and how much risk we're prepared to take as well. So, and I think all that's in the mix, you know, and I think one of the things that's happening is that people are watching other people's countries as they come out of lockdown and going, so how many people died in that country yesterday?
It's the same everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, I don't think there's any return to the past.
Okay, Charlie, he asks, since you founded the Society of Black Architects in the UK, have you noticed significant improvements on inclusion in the field?
No. that's the short answer. In fact, if the statistics are to be believed, it's got worse. So when we started the Society of Black Architects, the statistics showed that it was 2% of self-certified people who are describing themselves as being from minority ethnic groups were registered architects, and last year it was 0.9%. So in my terrible mathematics, it's gone from very bad to absolutely bloody awful. So, so that's the short answer. But I mean, I think that the thing to do is that I think we all sort of thought, oh well, you know, it all makes sense. So if it all makes sense, then of course people with goodwill are going to make sure it changes. And the fact is that the sad fact is that you just have to be on the case. You can't, as the English expression is, rest on your laurels. You know, you just have to be vigilant. So no, it hasn't got better. Well, actually, no, that's not true. It has in lots and lots of ways. But I think that it's still a precarious profession for small people, and most minorities are within that area, which is of small and micro businesses. So it's a precarious life if you're in that sector of being small or micro. And most Black and minority ethnic people, I would say, are in that sector. So it's, you know, it's not just a straightforward question of race or color. It's a whole mix of social measures and programs, activities.
Carmen Mendoza, she asks again, how do you incorporate the cultural aspects in your architecture when working out of the UK?
Well, you start where your client is. So if I'm working in Nigeria, it's not my culture, but it's working with Yinka Shonibari. It's not my culture, but it's his culture. And he knows much more about what he wants than I do. So whether it's him or other people, I think, you know, the most important faculty that an architect has are these. You know, so you listen, I think.
Do you use participatory design, she asks?
Well, I would say I do what I'm told, by and large. I think it was Renzo Piano who said an architect has to really, really listen, but not always do what they're told. So I do. I mean, it's very difficult sometimes, because you do want to jump in and say, well, I tell you what, you know, Charles and Ray Eames did something like that, you know, and you mustn't do that. You must just listen and learn from. It's a bit like being a conductor in an orchestra. You know, when you get a new score, you can't assume that it's like all the other scores that you've played or heard before, you know. And lots of times people say, well, it's, you know, they're a bit like saying about a conductor, oh, well, that conductor just stands around and waves their arms around. You know, anybody can wave their arms around. But it's but, you know, it's like being a conductor. You know stuff that other people don't know. And if it looks easy, then I think you're doing your job really well. So I think just being quiet and listening is where I tend to start.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. Valentina, she asks, do you think this new way of creating architecture should encourage international collaborating research or it is more about local architects?
I think it's both. I think it's global and it's local, which is so exciting because with this technology, or even better with WhatsApp, you know, I can get a drawing to the north of Ghana faster than I can get it across London. And if we can get that communication going so that we are sharing ideas, sharing drawings, sharing models, sharing 3D, participating in design, I think, to me, you know, and I'm always over optimistic, to me, this is an absolute life changer or society changing time, because I mean, these technologies have always existed, but now we've been forced to use them, and now we know how efficient they can be. It's a bit like working at home. You know, it's always been a possibility for people to work at home, but now we've started working at home, we realize that there are benefits.
Actually, your co-workers already worked from home, right?
Yeah. So,
before the pandemic.
Yeah, so we work at home. We've always worked at home. Well, we call it working remotely because working at home sounds like you're in your pajamas.
Let's say that.
So we've always worked at home, and we meet once a week on a Wednesday. So now we meet once a week on a Wednesday by Zoom. So actually, it works superbly well, and we've realized that we can have the people from Nigeria in on our Zoom meetings as well. So, you know, we've just learned so much just because we've been forced to think about it.
Okay, I think we are going to close with this deep question from Guillem Caraví, director of Foros of lecture series. When Elsie Owusu looks architecture, what kind of architecture does she look at?
Oh, what kind of architecture do I see? I see the person that I'm working for. I see my client is the architecture I see, because you never know what sort of architecture you're going to get until you're standing in the room with a finished project, and your client has elbowed you to the back of the room and is standing there saying, now the way I designed this project is and when your client takes credit for the work that you've done and your team's done, then you know that is a very special project, because it belongs to them, it doesn't belong to you anymore.
Okay, Elsie, thank you very much for your inspiring answers. I think I would like now to invite Guillem Caraví, Freddy Massat, and Carmen Mendoza to close this session. Thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And hope we can have you here someday when things get better for everyone.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you.
Carmen?
Oh, I start. Well, thanks so much. It's been very interesting. I think I'll stay with what you said, that the doctors were in charge of the emergency, but artists and architects are going to be in charge of providing a resilient future. And I really do believe that will happen. We are creative and way of thinking. We'll probably find a way to you know, make this a good reason to change, to go to the future. Thank you for your great responses, your interesting talk. I think it's this is what we knew would happen. As I said, it's going to enhance our students to start thinking of more of a collaborative form of architecture, of co-creating things, and also working at a distance. I think it's great what your firm is doing. So thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise.
Yes, thank you very much, Elsie. I hope you have you soon in Barcelona for a lecture in autumn, if it's possible, if this nightmare end. Y bueno, y muchas gracias a todos por seguirnos en este ciclo, con los cambios, con todo lo que nos obligó a hacer el coronavirus, pero bueno, estamos aquí todavía y creo que fue muy provechoso hacerlo. Gracias a todos. Thank you very much, Elsie, for accepting the invitation. And Guillem, it's your turn.
Gracias, Freddy. Elsie, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Elsie, for your lecture and your further conversation. I think it has been very useful for our students, and you're invited again whenever you want in University International of Catalunya. Thank you, Elsie. Bien, cerramos el ciclo Co-Benefits, beneficios colaterales, en el que hemos tratado, a partir de la experiencia de nuestros invitados, contrastar miradas y opiniones acerca de esa construcción tangente a la arquitectura a partir de otras disciplinas. Repaso muy brevemente los invitados que hemos tenido. Klaus nos mostraba cómo hacer crítica y sátira de la arquitectura contemporánea desde el dibujo, desde el cómic. Madola, artista plástica, realizaba un recorrido retrospectivo de su obra en la que desde las pequeñas piezas y operaciones de gran formato se nutrían de conceptos como vacío, densidad, ritmo y tantos otros compartidos por la arquitectura. Karma Torrent, coreógrafa, nos mostró la capacidad del cuerpo como instrumento de interpretación e intercambio de un lugar a través de una técnica basada en la lentitud de sus movimientos. El arquitecto Maroš Jedrulias reflexionaba sobre aquella modernidad inacabada de la Yugoslavia y la paradoja de un tiempo presente, político y económico, ineficaz para dar salida a alguna de las propuestas sociales y urbanas de un futuro que ya habían sido propuestas 40 años antes. La videoartista Jill Maggett ponía como telón de fondo una propuesta controvertida para poner en evidencia las debilidades de un sistema económico que arrasa con cualquier otra consideración de carácter social o cultural, como es la gestión del patrimonio arquitectónico, en su caso del archivo Luis Barragán. La socióloga Nicole Ashoff reflexionaba sobre la gestión de datos generados por aplicaciones en el mundo digital y su repercusión en el trazado de las nuevas fronteras digitales en un contexto cada vez más intenso de ciudades entendidas como agrupaciones administrativas, colectivas y emocionales. Y finalmente, Elsie Owusu nos ha hablado, entre muchísimas otras cosas, de cómo aprovechar esta situación de confinamiento que nos obliga para repensar, corregir y mejorar la arquitectura futura. Miradas todas ellas que desde la dirección de Foros 2020 han buscado un único objetivo, la voluntad de formar un conjunto de beneficios colaterales a la enseñanza y la discusión de la arquitectura contemporánea. Algunas de ellas las podréis recuperar en YouTube, en Foros 2020 UIC Barcelona, a partir de la conferencia de Maroš Jedrulias, también la de Nicole Ashoff, también la de Jill Maggett y, evidentemente, la de Elsie Owusu. Muchísimas gracias a Marcos do Espíritu Santo, que ha sido de nuevo la voz y, digamos, el vehículo de comunicación entre los estudiantes y la invitada Elsie Owusu. Muchas gracias a todos por vuestra participación y cuídense mucho.
Sí,